I was standing in my kitchen holding a cream-colored envelope that wasn't meant to hurt me but somehow did anyway. It was my younger sister's wedding invitation, or at least that's what I thought it was. The envelope felt heavier than paper should, thick cardstock, raised lettering, my name printed neatly on the front like proof that I still belonged somewhere. I remember thinking how strange it was that my hands were shaking. I told myself it was excitement, nerves, normal sister stuff. Then my phone rang. It was my mother. I put the invitation down on the counter next to a half-chopped onion and a glass of water I hadn't touched. I answered with a smile in my voice, the kind you learn to fake early in life. "Hey, Mom." There was a pause on the other end, not long, just long enough. "Oh, you got it," she said. Got what I asked already, feeling something tighten in my chest. The invitation, she said, to Claire's wedding. I glanced at the envelope again. Yeah, I was just about to open it. Another pause, longer this time. "Well," she said carefully, "I guess it doesn't matter now." I frowned. "What do you mean it doesn't matter?" She exhaled like I was the one being difficult. "Evelyn, honey, the wedding was last weekend." The word last landed wrong, like it didn't belong in the sentence. "Last weekend," I repeated. "No, that can't be right." There was a clink on her end, a spoon hitting a mug. I pictured her in her kitchen, calm, unbothered. The same kitchen where I'd learned to make coffee for everyone else before I was tall enough to see over the counter. "That's strange," she said. "Are you sure you're reading it correctly?" My throat went dry. I picked up the invitation, slid my finger under the flap and pulled it open. Saturday, September 17th, 2 p.m. "Tomorrow?" "Mom," I said slowly, "it says tomorrow." She didn't answer right away. Then softly, "Oh, then there must have been a mix-up." A mix-up. I laughed once, sharp and ugly. "What kind of mix-up?" "Well," she said, "the planner must have sent out a few incorrect cards." "A few." My fingers tightened around the paper. So, the wedding already happened. Yes, and everyone was there. "It was small," she said quickly, "just close family." The word family echoed in my head like a joke I didn't understand. "Who exactly counts as family now?" I asked. She sighed. "Evelyn, don't start." "Start what?" Pointing out that my sister had gotten married without me. Pointing out that I was her only sister. Pointing out that I'd helped pay for the venue deposit when Claire's savings fell short. Pointing out that I'd taken time off work, booked a hair appointment, bought a gift that was still sitting in my closet wrapped in silk paper. Pointing out that nobody thought to call me. "I didn't know," I said, my voice strangely calm. "I didn't know I wasn't invited." "That's not fair," she said immediately. "You make it sound intentional." I looked around my quiet apartment. The hum of the refrigerator, the ticking clock above the sink. Everything normal. Everything wrong. "Was it intentional?" I asked. She didn't answer. That was when my father's voice drifted into the background. "Who is it?" "Evelyn," my mother said. Another pause. "Then let's talk about this later." I felt something inside me settle, not break, settle. "He knew," I said. "No one was trying to hurt you," my mother insisted. "Claire just wanted a peaceful day." Peaceful from what I asked, from me. "You tend to take up space," she said before she could stop herself. There it was. I ended the call without saying goodbye. I stood there for a long moment, staring at the invitation in my hand, like it was evidence from a crime scene. The gold lettering suddenly felt cruel, performative, a prop meant to maintain the illusion that I mattered. My phone buzzed, a notification from social media. I didn't want to look, I did anyway. There was Claire, smiling in white. My parents on either side of her arms linked proud and polished. The caption read, "So grateful for my family today." Family. I scrolled. Another photo. Another smile. Another comment from my mother. My girls looked beautiful. Girls. Plural. I wasn't in a single frame. Something cold spread through my chest, slow and deliberate. Not anger yet. Not tears. Just clarity. I saw it then all at once. The forgotten birthdays. The promotions they never celebrated. The way emergencies only went one direction, me to them, never the other way around. I thought about the time I'd co-signed a loan for my parents because my sister wasn't good with numbers. The time I wired money to help cover Claire's business losses. The holidays where I cooked, cleaned, paid, smiled, and left early so everyone else could relax. I had mistaken usefulness for love. I picked up my coat and left the apartment. Outside the air was sharp. Fall had arrived quietly like everything else in my life. I got into my car and sat there staring at my reflection in the rearview mirror. I looked older than I felt. Or maybe younger. like someone who had just realized the rules of a game she'd been playing her whole life without consent. My phone buzzed again, a text from my sister. "You didn't miss much." That was when the numbness broke. Not into tears, into resolve. They thought excluding me was the end of the story. They were wrong. It was the beginning. Because when you're finally erased from a picture, you're free to burn the frame and build something better. And I was done waiting for invitations. I didn't sleep that night. I lay on my bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the city breathe through the open window. Somewhere below, a siren wailed and faded. A car door slammed. Life moved on with no regard for the fact that my entire understanding of family had quietly collapsed over a phone call and a pastel envelope. At some point after midnight, I got up and walked into the kitchen. The wedding invitation was still on the counter where I'd left it. I picked it up, smoothed the edges with my thumb, and read the names again like repetition might change the outcome. "Claire and Andrew request the pleasure of your company." The pleasure? I laughed under my breath. It came out brittle, unfamiliar. I carried the invitation to the trash, hovered for a moment, then set it down instead. Not yet. I wasn't ready to throw away proof. I poured myself a glass of water, then didn't drink it. Instead, I sat at the small table by the window and let memories rise uninvited. It hadn't started with the wedding. That was just the moment the curtain finally lifted. The pattern had been there for years. When we were kids, Claire was the soft one, the sensitive one, the one who needed protecting. I was the practical one, the one who could handle things. That distinction followed us into adulthood like an unspoken contract. If Claire cried, plans changed. If I struggled, I adapted. When I graduated college, my parents told me how proud they were in passing, then asked if I could help Claire move apartments the same weekend. When I got promoted, they nodded and asked if I could loan Claire money for a new laptop. When my birthday fell on a weekday, they forgot. When hers landed anywhere on the calendar, there was cake. I told myself it didn't matter. I told myself I didn't need the attention. I told myself being dependable was its own reward. But sitting there in the quiet, I finally admitted the truth. I had been training them how to treat me. At 3 a.m, my phone buzzed. I looked at the screen, my heart jumping before I could stop it. A text from my father. "Your mother is upset. You didn't have to hang up on her like that." I stared at the message. No question, no apology, just correction. I typed back slowly. I didn't hang up. The conversation ended. The dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. "You know how she gets," he finally wrote. "You should call her tomorrow." I set the phone face down. Tomorrow had already been taken from me. When the sun rose, it brought no clarity, only exhaustion. I showered, dressed, went through the motions like a person who still believed routine could protect her from pain. I had planned to spend the day at work, bury myself in spreadsheets and deadlines, but around 10 a.m, my phone rang again. This time it was Claire. I let it ring. She called again. On the third attempt, I answered. What I said, skipping pleasantries. There was silence on the other end, then a familiar sigh. "Wow, okay. You got married without me," I said. "Let's not pretend this is awkward because of my tone." She exhaled. "I knew you'd make this about you." That sentence hit harder than I expected. "I wasn't there," I said. "How exactly did I make it about me?" "You always do," she said. "You don't even realize it." I closed my eyes. "Help me understand." She hesitated. "You intimidate people, Evelyn." I laughed, sharp and humorless. "By existing, by succeeding," she snapped. "By always being the one who has everything together. The job, the apartment, the savings. You make everyone else feel small." The words sank in slowly. "So instead of dealing with that," I said carefully, "you erased me." "It wasn't like that," she said quickly. "Mom just thought it would be easier." "Easier? I paid for part of your wedding," I reminded her. "You asked me to." "That was different," she said. "You offered." I hadn't. But I'd stopped correcting people years ago. "I just wanted one day," she continued. "One day that was about me, without you looming." There it was, the truth she hadn't meant to say out loud. I sat down heavily on the edge of my bed. "You didn't want a sister," I said. "You wanted an audience." She scoffed. "You're twisting everything." "No," I said quietly. "I'm finally seeing it clearly." She went silent, then said, "I can't do this right now." The line went dead. I didn't cry. I felt something else instead. Something colder, sharper. That afternoon, I called in sick to work and did something I'd been avoiding for years. I opened my bank statements. Not just the recent ones, all of them. I scrolled through transfers, withdrawals, wires, money moving out of my accounts in steady increments, some labeled, some not. I started a list. Helped parents with mortgage. Loaned Claire money for business. Covered insurance shortfall. Emergency repairs. Temporary help that never ended. By the time I finished, my chest felt tight. This wasn't generosity, it was infrastructure. I was holding up a system that had learned to lean on me and forget I was human. Buried in the paperwork was something I'd almost forgotten. A property tax notice, Lake Briarwood. My name. I frowned and opened the email. I remembered the day we bought it. My parents had wanted a small vacation place near the water. Their credit wasn't strong enough, so I'd stepped in. It was easier that way. I had the income, the stability, the trust. We put it in my name for now. For now had turned into years. I sat back, heart pounding. They'd been renting it out, using it, talking about it like it was theirs. But legally, it was mine. For the first time since the wedding, I smiled. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I finally understood something vital. They hadn't just excluded me from a celebration. They had forgotten who held the foundation beneath their feet. And I was done being quiet about it. That evening, I texted my friend Marissa. We'd known each other since college. She was a lawyer now. Sharp, discreet, loyal. Can you meet tomorrow? I wrote. I need advice, real advice. Her reply came quickly. Of course, coffee at 10. Bring whatever you've got. I looked around my apartment at the life I'd built largely on my own. The calm, the order. They thought I was dramatic. They hadn't seen anything yet. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't even going to confront them. I was going to do something far more dangerous. I was going to stop saving them, and once I did, the truth would have nowhere left to hide. Marissa was already seated when I walked into the cafe the next morning, her laptop open, coffee untouched. She looked up as I approached, her expression shifting the moment she saw my face. Okay, she said. That look means someone crossed a line. I slid into the chair across from her and set my phone, a folder, and a folded stack of papers on the table. They didn't invite me to my sister's wedding, I said. Marissa blinked once. They what? They sent me an invitation with the wrong date. The wedding happened the weekend before. Her jaw tightened. That's not an accident. I know I said I didn't yesterday, but I do now. She leaned back slowly. Start from the beginning. So I did. I told her everything. The call from my mother, Claire's excuses, the money, the years of being dependable, the way every favor turned permanent the moment I stopped questioning it. When I finished, the cafe felt louder, espresso machines hissing, dishes clinking, life carrying on while mine quietly rearranged itself. Marissa was silent for a long moment. Okay, she said finally, let's talk facts. She reached for the papers. What's this? The lake house, I said. It's in my name. I forgot until yesterday. Her eyebrows lifted slightly as she scanned the first page. Then she smiled, not kindly, not cruelly, precisely. They forgot too, she said, or they assumed you'd never notice. What does that mean? I asked. It means, she said, tapping the page, that legally you own it. Fully. And if they're renting it out or using it for income without your consent, that's a problem. My pulse quickened. For them. Yes, she said calmly. For them. I wrapped my hands around my coffee, suddenly aware it had gone cold. I don't want to destroy them. Marissa met my eyes. No, you want to stop being destroyed. I nodded. Then listen carefully, she said. This isn't about confrontation. It's about leverage. Quiet, boring, legal leverage. She pulled out a pen and flipped her notebook open. First, she said, we confirm ownership and usage, taxes, rental income, listings, anything with their name on it. They've been calling it theirs for years, I said. That's irrelevant, she replied. Paper matters, intentions don't. Something in my chest loosened. Not anger, relief. For years, I said, they made me feel like I was overreacting, like I imagined the imbalance. You didn't, she said. You normalized it. We sat in silence for a moment. Then she looked at me carefully. You need to decide something. What? How far you're willing to go? I thought of my mother's voice. Calm, correcting. I thought of my sister's words. Intimidating, looming. I thought of the wedding photos where I didn't exist. I'm willing to go as far as the truth takes me, I said. Marissa smiled faintly. Good answer. That afternoon, I didn't go home. I went to the county records office. I hadn't planned to. I told myself I was just gathering information, that I wasn't doing anything drastic. But the moment I saw my name printed clearly as sole owner on the property deed, something inside me shifted. Evelyn Hart, owner, not co-owner, not temporary holder, owner. The clerk slid the document across the counter. Everything looks current, she said. Taxes are paid up through last year. Last year, I asked. She frowned slightly. Yes, nothing posted yet for this cycle. I swallowed. Who usually pays them? She glanced at the screen. Looks like payments came from an account not in your name. I nodded slowly. Thank you. I walked out of the building into bright sunlight, my mind racing. They'd been paying just enough to keep things running. Not because they owned it, because they assumed I'd never pull the thread. That evening, my mother called again. I let it ring. She left a voicemail. Evelyn, she said, her tone wounded, practiced. Your sister is very upset. This whole situation is unnecessary. Families don't keep score. I deleted it. Families also don't erase people. The next day, Claire posted again, a photo dump from the wedding weekend. Smiles, champagne. A comment from an aunt praising how close this family is. I stared at the screen, then closed the app. I wasn't going to fight them in public. I wasn't going to plead my case. I was going to do something far more unsettling. I was going to disappear from their support system. That Friday, I stopped the automatic transfers. The small ones first. The insurance payment. The phone bill I'd been covering temporarily. The streaming service under my account. Nothing dramatic, nothing loud, just silence. On Sunday evening, my father called. This is ridiculous, he said without greeting. The cable got shut off. I smiled faintly. Did it? Yes, he snapped. Your mother's been trying to reach you. I've been reachable, I said. I just haven't been rescuing. There was a pause. You're punishing us, he said. No, I replied. I'm opting out. You're being selfish. I laughed quietly. Funny. That word never came up when I was paying. He hung up. I sat on my couch afterward, heart pounding, not with fear, but with adrenaline. For the first time, I wasn't managing their emotions. I wasn't smoothing things over. I wasn't absorbing blame. And something unexpected happened. The world didn't collapse. It got quieter. The following week, Marissa called me. I pulled the rental listing, she said. They've been advertising the lake house as a short-term rental under your parents' names. My stomach flipped. And I asked. And she said, that's about to stop. I closed my eyes. What do we do next, I asked. Marissa's voice was steady, professional. We remind them, she said, who owns the ground they're standing on. I hung up and stared out my window at the city below. They thought the wedding was the betrayal. They were wrong. That was just the moment I woke up. What came next would be quieter, cleaner, and far more devastating. Because when people build their lives on what you quietly provide, the most powerful revenge isn't taking more. It's taking yourself out of the equation and letting gravity do the rest. The letter went out on a Tuesday. Marissa called it a courtesy notice. I called it a boundary in an envelope. It was brief, polite, almost boring. It stated that I was the sole legal owner of the Lake Briarwood property. That any rental activity, commercial use, or representation of ownership without my written consent would need to cease immediately. That future communication regarding the property should be directed to my attorney. No accusations, no emotion, no room for interpretation. I didn't send it myself, Marissa did. That mattered. Because the moment it arrived, the story stopped being about hurt feelings and started being about facts. I found out it had landed when my phone rang at 6:45 that evening. My mother. I let it ring. She called again, then again. On the fourth attempt, I answered. What did you do? She demanded, skipping hello. I leaned back against my kitchen counter, watching the sky darken outside my window. Good evening to you, too. You sent a lawyer after us, she said, her voice tight with disbelief. After everything we've done for you. I didn't send anyone after you, I said calmly. I clarified ownership. That house is family property, she snapped. You know that. No, I said, it's not. She laughed, sharp and brittle. You think a piece of paper changes the truth? Yes, I said. That's actually exactly how it works. Silence. Then softer, wounded. Why are you doing this? I considered the question. Because you lied to me, I said. Because you erased me. Because you used my money and my stability while pretending I didn't exist. That's not fair, she said quickly. You're blowing this out of proportion. I'm responding proportionally, I said. I stopped pretending. Her breath caught. You're hurting your sister. I closed my eyes. No, I'm no longer cushioning her. That's cruel. No, I said. What you did was cruel. She raised her voice. We were protecting her. From what I asked, from my presence. You make things complicated, she snapped. You always have. I smiled, though she couldn't see it. I make things honest. She hung up. I stood there for a long moment after the call ended, my heart steady, my hands still. I hadn't raised my voice. I hadn't apologized. And I hadn't caved. The next morning, my father showed up at my apartment, unannounced. I opened the door to find him standing there, jaw clenched, shoulders stiff, like he'd rehearsed this in the car. We need to talk, he said. Do we? I asked. He stepped inside without waiting for an answer, looking around like he was seeing my space for the first time. The clean lines, the quiet, the life I'd built without them noticing. This isn't how family behaves, he said. I gestured to the couch. Sit or don't, but don't lecture. He sat. You embarrassed your mother, he said. The renters called her confused, upset. I didn't embarrass her, I replied. Reality did. He glared. You're punishing us over a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding is forgetting to RSVP, I said. This was a decision. He leaned forward. You weren't excluded. I laughed softly. I had the wrong date. Everyone else had the right one. Explain that to me slowly. His mouth opened, closed. She didn't want tension, he said finally. Tension caused by what I asked. Me breathing. You know how Claire is, he said. Yes, I said, I do. There it was again. That sentence. The one that excused everything. I stood up. This conversation isn't productive. You're tearing the family apart, he said. I looked at him, really looked. At the man who'd watched silently while I funded their emergencies. Who'd let my mother rewrite reality while I paid for it. No, I said quietly. I am stepping out of the role you assigned me. He stood abruptly. You think this is strength? Yes, I said, because I'm not afraid of being disliked anymore. He left without another word. That afternoon, Claire called. I didn't answer. She texted. You've gone too far. Mom's crying. Dad's furious. You've ruined everything. I stared at the screen. Then I typed back. I didn't ruin anything. I stopped lying. The dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. You always do this. You act like the victim. I set the phone down without replying. That night, Marissa called with an update. They tried to file a complaint, she said, claimed implied ownership based on family use. And I asked. And it went nowhere, she said. There's no legal basis, but they're panicking. I closed my eyes, exhaled. What about the rentals? Shut down, she said, listings removed, payments frozen. A strange sensation spread through my chest. Not triumph, relief. They built their budget around that income, Marissa continued. Without it, things are going to get tight. I never wanted to hurt them, I said. I know, she replied. But you're not responsible for the consequences of their assumptions. The next day, something unexpected happened. My aunt called. I just wanted you to know, she said quietly. I heard what happened, and I'm proud of you. I blinked. You are? Yes, she said. Your mother's version is selective. I laughed softly. That's one word for it. She's telling people you're unstable, my aunt added. That success went to your head. I smiled to myself. Of course she is. But people remember, my aunt said. Who paid for what? Who showed up? Who didn't? When we hung up, I sat by my window and watched the city lights come on. They were losing control of the narrative. And they hated it. By Friday, the messages slowed. The calls stopped. The silence returned, but this time it felt different. It wasn't abandonment. It was distance, chosen, maintained, earned. I poured myself a glass of wine and stood in my living room, alone but steady. They had spent years teaching me that love meant sacrifice. I was finally teaching them that access had a price. And the bill had come due. The first real crack appeared on a Sunday morning. I was halfway through my coffee when my phone buzzed with a notification I hadn't expected. An email from the property management company that handled the lake house rentals. The subject line was neutral, almost polite. Urgent clarification needed regarding ownership and access. I opened it slowly. They explained that my parents had contacted them repeatedly over the past 2 days, insisting there had been a mistake, that I was overreacting, that the house was a family asset. They wanted the rental listings reinstated. They wanted access restored. They wanted the payments released. The manager ended with a simple sentence. Before we proceed, we need your confirmation. I stared at the screen for a long moment. This was it. The moment where I could soften things, where I could say let it go, where I could compromise, where I could step back into the role that made everyone else comfortable. I typed my response carefully. There is no mistake. I am the sole legal owner. Please direct all further communication to me. Any access granted without my written approval will be considered unauthorized. I hit send. My hands didn't shake. That afternoon, my father called again. I let it ring. He left a voicemail. Evelyn, he said, his voice low, strained. Your mother is beside herself. She hasn't slept. We can't keep living like this. I deleted it. An hour later, another voicemail. This one shorter. Please, just talk to us. I sat on my couch staring at the blank television screen. For the first time, I noticed how quiet my apartment really was. No background noise, no emotional static. Just me and my thoughts. They weren't asking to talk. They were asking me to fix it. I didn't. Monday morning came with consequences. My mother showed up at my workplace. I didn't see her at first. I was in a meeting when my assistant knocked lightly on the door. There's someone here to see you, she said, hesitant. She says it's urgent. I stepped into the hallway and froze. My mother stood near the reception desk, arms crossed, lips pressed tight, eyes scanning the room like she owned it. Like she always had. She spotted me and walked over immediately. "We need to talk," she said loud enough for people to hear. "Not here," I replied calmly. She scoffed. "You don't get to control everything." I met her gaze. "Actually, I do, just not you." A few heads turned. I could feel the attention, the curiosity, the story she wanted to tell unfolding in real time. "You've humiliated us," she hissed. "Your father can't even look at people." I lowered my voice. "You humiliated yourselves." Her eyes flashed. "How dare you?" "How dare I?" What I asked quietly. "Stop paying. Stop lying. Stop disappearing when it's convenient for you." She opened her mouth, then closed it. "This is because of the wedding," she said finally. "You're still punishing us." "No," I said, "I'm protecting myself." She laughed bitterly. "From what, your own family?" "Yes," I said simply. She stared at me like she didn't recognize me. "Maybe she didn't." "You think you're better than us now," she said. "I think I'm done being less," I replied. She shook her head, disgusted. "You've changed." I nodded. "That's the point." Security appeared a moment later, polite but firm. I hadn't called them. Someone else had. She noticed, straightened, and gave me one last look filled with something close to hatred. "This isn't over," she said. "It is for me," I replied. She left. The office buzzed afterward. Whispers, side glances. My assistant brought me a glass of water I hadn't asked for. "You okay?" she asked gently. I nodded. "I am now." That evening, Claire posted again. A long message this time. About family. About forgiveness. About how money changes people. About how some people mistake success for superiority. I didn't read the comments. I didn't need to. The next morning, Marissa called. "They're scrambling," she said. "Your parents tried to access a line of credit tied to the rental income." And I asked? "Denied," she said. "Without the property income, their financial picture doesn't look great." I leaned back in my chair. "They'll blame me." "They already are," she replied. "But here's the thing. Blame doesn't pay bills." There was a pause. "Are you okay with what comes next?" she asked. I thought about my mother's face in my office, my father's voicemails, my sister's posts. "I'm okay with the truth," I said, "even if it's loud." "Good," Marissa said, "because this is where the tables turn." That Friday, I received a letter in the mail, handwritten, from my grandmother. It was short. "I heard what happened. I don't know all the details, but I know this. You were always the strong one. Don't let them use that against you." I folded the letter carefully and placed it in a drawer. Strength, I realized, wasn't enduring mistreatment. It was ending it. By the end of the week, the calls stopped again. Not because they'd accepted it, because they were running out of options. I stood by my window that night, watching the city glow beneath me. Somewhere across town, my family was unraveling a story they'd built on my silence. They thought I'd come back. They always did. They didn't understand one crucial thing. I wasn't angry anymore. I was finished. And that scared them more than any confrontation ever could. The silence didn't last. It never does when people are used to control. 3 days after my mother showed up at my office, I received an email from an unfamiliar address. The subject line was carefully neutral. "Family property clarification." I opened it. It was from a lawyer. Not Marissa, not anyone I recognized. He wrote on behalf of my parents, stating that while the Lake Briarwood property was technically in my name, there had been an understanding that it belonged to the family as a shared asset. He cited years of use, upkeep, and emotional investment. He requested a meeting to resolve the matter amicably. I read it twice. Then I forwarded it to Marissa. Her reply came within minutes. "This is a fishing expedition. They have nothing. Do not respond." I closed my laptop and sat back in my chair. So this was the next move. Not apology, not accountability. Rewriting history with legal letterhead. That evening, my father called again. I answered this time. "You got a lawyer," he said without greeting. "So did you," I replied. A pause. "We didn't want it to come to this." I smiled faintly. "Neither did I." "But you chose to pretend I didn't exist." "That's not fair," he said, weary now. "Your mother just wanted peace." "Peace that required my absence," I said. "That's not peace. That's convenience." He sighed. "You've always been so rigid." I laughed softly. "You mean consistent." Another pause. "You don't understand what you're doing," he said. "You're burning bridges." "No," I said. "I'm finally seeing where they lead." He didn't respond. When the call ended, I felt something unexpected. Not sadness. Relief. The next morning, something else arrived. A notification from my bank. "Unusual access attempt detected." I opened the alert. Someone had tried to log into one of my older savings accounts. One my parents knew about from years ago back when I'd trusted them with everything. The attempt had failed. My stomach tightened. I called the bank immediately. After verifying my identity, the representative confirmed it. The access attempt came from a device previously associated with a secondary contact, she said. Secondary contact. My mother. I thanked her, changed every password, added new security measures, and hung up. Then I sat very still. This wasn't about hurt feelings anymore. This was about entitlement. They weren't just upset that I'd stopped helping. They believed they were owed access. That afternoon, I met Marissa in her office. Her jaw tightened when I told her. That crosses a line, she said. We're documenting everything. I never thought she'd try that, I admitted. Marissa looked at me steadily. You trusted her. She assumed that meant ownership. We spent the next hour going through accounts, property records, and old documents. She was methodical, calm. Every click of her keyboard felt like another knot loosening in my chest. When we finished, she leaned back. There's something else, she said. I braced myself. What? They've been telling people you're unstable. I let out a breath. Of course they have. Specifically, Marissa continued, that you're having a breakdown, that work stress made you lash out, that they're worried about your mental health. I laughed, sharp and incredulous. So now I'm not just ungrateful, I'm unwell. It's a classic move, she said. Discredit the person who stops cooperating. Will it work? I asked. She shook her head. Not with evidence, and not for long. That night I didn't go home. I drove. No destination, just movement. Streets blurring past the city, glowing like a map of choices I hadn't let myself consider before. I thought about all the times I'd swallowed my discomfort to keep the peace. All the moments I'd chosen quiet resentment over loud honesty. I thought about how easily they'd switch tactics when guilt stopped working. And something inside me hardened, not into cruelty, into clarity. The next day, Claire texted me. We need to talk. This has gone too far. I stared at the message. Then I replied, I agree, it has. She called immediately. You're destroying Mom, she said the moment I answered. I closed my eyes. I'm not responsible for her reactions. You're cutting us off, she snapped. You froze accounts. You sent lawyers. You're acting like an enemy. I stopped enabling, I said. You're reacting like addicts. She gasped. How dare you? How dare I tell the truth? I asked. You lied about your wedding. You took my money. You let Mom rewrite reality. She was silent for a moment. Then quieter, you didn't have to go nuclear. I didn't, I said. I went honest. You think you're better than us? She said again. No, I replied. I think I deserve basic respect. She scoffed. You've always needed to win. I smiled sadly. I never wanted to compete. You just couldn't stand that I existed without needing you. She hung up. That evening, Marissa sent me an update. They're running out of leverage. Expect escalation. She was right. 2 days later, I received notice of a formal claim filed against me. Not for the lake house. For elder abuse. I stared at the words, disbelief flooding my chest. They were claiming I'd financially abandoned my parents, that I'd caused emotional distress, that my actions constituted harm. Marissa was furious. This is retaliatory, she said, and baseless. I never thought they'd do this, I whispered. She looked at me carefully. They don't see this as harm. They see it as strategy. I sat back, heart racing. This was no longer about proving I was right. This was about survival. But as fear crept in, something else rose with it. Resolve. They had underestimated me my entire life, assumed I'd bend, apologize, fix it. They'd mistaken my patience for weakness. Now they were about to learn the difference, because the truth was documented. The money was traceable. The property was mine. And this time I wasn't standing alone. I was standing on solid ground, and I was done retreating. The accusation changed everything. Until that moment, I had believed there were lines my parents wouldn't cross. That no matter how angry or desperate they became, there was still some shared understanding of reality, of truth. I was wrong. The notice arrived by certified mail on a Thursday afternoon. I signed for it absent-mindedly, assuming it was another piece of legal post related to the property dispute. I didn't even sit down before opening it. Allegation of financial neglect and emotional harm, filed on behalf of my parents. My vision tunneled as I read. They claimed I had withdrawn essential support, that my actions had caused severe distress, that I had abandoned them after years of dependence they framed as mutual agreement. I sank onto the couch, the paper trembling in my hands. Elder abuse. That was the phrase that made my stomach turn. I called Marissa immediately. She answered on the first ring. They actually did it, I said. Her voice was calm but tight. I know, I just got a copy. I've spent years helping them, I said, the words tumbling out. Paying, managing, fixing, and now they're saying I hurt them. They're rewriting the story to regain control, she said. This is escalation, Evelyn. It's also a mistake. I swallowed. It doesn't feel like one. It is, she replied, because now they've put everything under scrutiny, including things they don't want examined. That stopped me. What do you mean? I asked. Marissa paused. How familiar are you with their finances? I laughed weakly. Too familiar, or so I thought. Good, she said. Because once they make claims like this, discovery opens the door to everything. Bank records, transfers, property use, rental income. I closed my eyes. They don't realize, I said slowly. No, Marissa agreed. They don't. That night, I couldn't sit still. I paced my apartment, replaying memories like evidence in my head. Every check, every wire, every time my mother, or my father, or Claire had said just this once. I pulled out old files I hadn't touched in years. Tax returns, loan agreements, emails I'd archived and forgotten. And that was when I found it. An email from 3 years ago. Subject line, just for now. It was from my mother. She'd asked for copies of my financial statements to help with paperwork related to the lake house. I'd sent them without hesitation. Scrolling further, my breath caught. There were follow-up emails, conversations I'd barely skimmed at the time. She'd used those documents to apply for a small loan, not in my name, but against my assets. My hands went cold. I forwarded everything to Marissa. Her reply came quickly. This is serious. They used your financial information without consent. If that loan is tied to your property, it's misrepresentation. So they didn't just rely on me, I typed back. They leveraged me. Yes, she replied. And that changes everything. The next day, we met in her office. The air felt heavier than before, more deliberate. Marissa spread documents across the table. If this goes to court, she said, their claim hinges on one thing. That you had a duty to provide for them. I didn't, I said. I chose to. And that distinction matters, she said, especially when we can show that your support wasn't one-sided kindness. It was systematically exploited. She slid another paper toward me. Bank transfers, labeled and dated. My money, their accounts. They weren't dependent, Marissa continued. They were opportunistic. I felt something inside me shift again. Not pain this time. Anger, clean and sharp. So what do we do? I asked. She met my gaze. We stopped playing defense. The hearing was scheduled quickly. Too quickly. It was a preliminary review, a chance for the court to decide whether their claim had merit. In the days leading up to it, my parents went silent. No calls, no messages, no dramatic posts from Claire. The calm before the storm. On the morning of this hearing, I dressed carefully, not to impress, to ground myself. Neutral colors, clean lines, nothing loud. Marissa met me outside the courthouse. They look nervous, she said quietly. I glanced across the plaza. My parents stood together, my mother clutching her purse tightly, my father staring at the ground. Claire wasn't there. For the first time, they looked small. Inside the room was quiet, sterile. The kind of place where stories go to be stripped down to facts. Their lawyer spoke first. He painted a picture of aging parents suddenly abandoned, of a daughter who'd grown distant, cold, consumed by her career, of emotional cruelty disguised as independence. I listened without interrupting. When it was Marissa's turn, she stood slowly. Your Honor, she said, this is not a case of abandonment. It is a case of boundary setting. She presented the records, years of financial support, evidence of property ownership, rental income my parents had collected without disclosure, and finally the loan. The judge's expression changed as he reviewed the documents. Mrs. Hart, he said, addressing my mother, did you apply for a loan using your daughter's financial information? My mother hesitated, then nodded. It was for the family. The judge looked up sharply. Did you have her consent? Silence. My father shifted uncomfortably. No, my mother said finally, but she would have helped. The judge leaned back. Assumptions are not authorization. The room felt suddenly very still. Marissa didn't smile. She didn't need to. The hearing ended quickly after that. The claim was dismissed, but that wasn't the real outcome. Outside the courthouse, Marissa turned to me. This isn't over, she said, but the power dynamic just flipped. I nodded, watching my parents walk away without looking back. They had tried to paint me as cruel. Instead, they'd exposed themselves. And now the story was no longer about a wedding. It was about truth. And the truth, once spoken in the right room, has a way of changing everything. The dismissal didn't end the war. It changed the battlefield. For the first time, my parents couldn't pretend this was a private family disagreement. The court had seen the paperwork, The bank records, the loan, the rentals, the story they told so easily at dinner tables no longer survived daylight. And they knew it. The calls didn't come from them after the hearing. They came from everyone else. An aunt I hadn't spoken to in years left a voicemail. A cousin texted cautiously asking if the rumors were true. An old family friend sent a long message full of concern and half-formed opinions. I didn't respond to most of them, not because I was hiding, because I was done explaining myself to people who hadn't been there when the money moved or the lies formed. Marissa called that evening. "They're shifting strategies," she said. "How so?" I asked. "They've stopped claiming you abandoned them," she said. "Now they're saying you manipulated them financially, that you controlled the assets to dominate the family." I laughed once, sharp and disbelieving. "So now I'm both negligent and controlling." "Contradictions don't matter when someone's panicking," she said. "What matters is who people believe." "And who do they believe?" I asked. Marissa paused. "Less people than your mother thinks." That night I opened social media for the first time in days. Claire had posted again. A long paragraph about betrayal, about how money poisons relationships, about how some people confuse boundaries with cruelty. The comments were mixed. Some offered sympathy. Others asked uncomfortable questions, like why my name was on the property deed, like why the loan documents didn't match my parents' version, like why Claire never mentioned the wrong wedding date. I closed the app. They were losing control of the narrative because the truth didn't need embellishment. 2 days later, something unexpected happened. My grandmother called. She hadn't spoken to me since before the wedding. "Evelyn," she said, her voice thin but steady. "I heard what happened in court." I braced myself and I wanted to hear it from you," she said. "Not your mother." So I told her. Not everything, just enough. I told her about the invitation, the money, the loan, the hearing. When I finished, she was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "Your mother learned this behavior from someone." I frowned. "What do you mean?" "She was always the favorite," my grandmother said softly. "She learned early that control looked like care." The words landed heavily. "I'm tired," my grandmother continued. "Tired of pretending this family hasn't been eating its own for generations." I swallowed. I didn't mean to tear anything apart. "You didn't," she said. "You refused to be swallowed." When we hung up, I sat in the dark for a long time absorbing that. Refused to be swallowed. The next escalation came quietly. An email from the property management company. Tenants at the lake house had filed a complaint. They claimed they'd been told the property was owned by my parents, that rental agreements were signed under my mother's name, that payments had gone into an account I'd never seen. I forwarded it to Marissa immediately. Her reply came fast. "This is good." I blinked. "Good?" She called a moment later. "This confirms misrepresentation," she said. "It also confirms unreported income." "You mean," I started. "Yes," she said. "They didn't just misuse your property, they may have avoided taxes on it." I closed my eyes. This wasn't revenge anymore. This was exposure. "They brought this on themselves," Marissa added, by escalating. That weekend, I drove to the lake house for the first time in months. I hadn't wanted to go before. It felt too tangled with memories that weren't fully mine. But now I needed to see it. The house was empty when I arrived. Quiet. Clean in the way temporary places are when no one belongs to them. I walked through each room slowly. The kitchen where my mother used to host friends, presenting the house like proof of success. The living room where my father would nap secure in a comfort he hadn't paid for. The guest room where Claire once stayed for an entire summer while I covered the utilities. I opened the back door and stepped onto the deck. The lake stretched out calm and reflective. The air smelled like pine and water and something new. Ownership. Not possession, not control. Ownership. I sat down on the steps and let the stillness settle into my bones. My phone buzzed. A message from Claire. "You didn't have to ruin everything." I stared at it. Then I typed back. "I didn't ruin anything, I stopped carrying it alone." No reply came. That night I stayed at the house. I slept better than I had in weeks. The next morning, sunlight filled the rooms in a way I'd never noticed before. For the first time, the space felt honest. When I returned home, Marissa was waiting with updates. "The tax issue is real," she said. "Authorities are looking into it." "What does that mean for them?" I asked. She chose her words carefully. "Financial penalties, possibly worse." I nodded slowly. "They keep saying I did this to them," I said. Marissa met my eyes. "No, they did this to themselves." The final twist came that afternoon. An article appeared in the local paper. No names, just details. A story about a family dispute over a lake property. About an adult daughter reclaiming assets after years of informal support. About allegations dismissed. About investigations underway. The comments were brutal. Some blamed the daughter, others praised her. But one comment stopped me cold. If your parents need you to lie so they can survive, they're not asking for help. They're asking for permission to keep exploiting you. I closed the article. The story was out now. Not the version my mother wanted, the real one. And as uncomfortable as that was, it carried something I hadn't felt in a long time: freedom. Because once the truth is public, manipulation loses its power. And I was done being quiet. The fallout didn't come all at once. It arrived in pieces like debris drifting to the surface after a ship goes down. The first sign was the phone call from my father. Not angry this time. Tired. He called late after 9 when he knew I'd be home. I stared at his name on the screen for a long moment before answering. "Evelyn," he said, his voice rough. "We need to talk." I leaned against the kitchen counter, staring out at the city lights. "About what?" He hesitated. "Things are difficult." I waited. "They're auditing the rental income," he said finally. "The lake house." I didn't respond. "They want records," he continued. "Bank statements, contracts, dates. You should give them everything," I said calmly. He let out a shaky breath. "Your mother is panicking." I closed my eyes. "She panics when she can't control the outcome." "That's not fair," he said weakly. "It's accurate," I replied. Another pause. "We might lose the house," he said. The words hung there heavy. I thought of all the nights I'd wired money without question. All the times I'd said, "Don't worry, I've got it." "You were never meant to have it," I said softly. "That house was supposed to secure our future," he said. "No," I corrected. "It secured your comfort. There's a difference." His voice cracked. "What do you want from us?" The question startled me. For years they'd told me what they wanted, what they needed, what they expected. No one had ever asked me this. "I want distance," I said, "and honesty, in that order." He was quiet for a long time. When he spoke again, his voice was barely above a whisper. "Your mother doesn't know how to live without you fixing things." I felt a familiar pull in my chest, the old instinct to soften, to step in. I didn't. "She's about to learn," I said. I hung up gently, not in anger but in resolve. The next blow came from Claire. She showed up at my apartment unannounced 2 days later. I opened the door and found her standing there, arms crossed, eyes red-rimmed but dry, controlled, always controlled. "You look well," she said coldly. "Why are you here?" I asked. She stepped inside without waiting for permission, just like our parents always did. "Mom's not eating," she said. "Dad's barely sleeping, and you're just living your life." I closed the door slowly. "That's not a crime." She turned on me. "You always do this. You detach, you act like you're above it." "I'm not above it," I said. "I'm outside it." She laughed bitterly. "You think this makes you strong?" "Yes," I said, "because I'm not lying anymore." "You could stop this," she said. "You could tell them you'll help again, just until things settle." I shook my head. "That's how it started. That's how it never ended." She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Do you have any idea what people are saying about us?" I met her gaze. "I stopped managing your reputation." Her face twisted. "You're punishing us because you weren't invited to one stupid wedding." I felt something snap. "No," I said sharply. "I woke up because you showed me exactly where I stood." She scoffed. "You're exaggerating." "You lied to me," I said. "You let Mom send me the wrong date. You watched me plan, prepare, care." She looked away. That was all the confirmation I needed. "Say it," I said. She swallowed. "I didn't think it would go this far." "But you thought it would hurt me," I said. She didn't answer. "I paid for part of that wedding," I continued. "I paid for your failures. I paid for Mom and Dad's safety net." Her voice rose. "You always bring up money." "Because you always spend it," I shot back. She flinched. "You don't get to pretend this is about feelings," I said. "This is about patterns." Her shoulders slumped. For a moment she looked younger, smaller. "We didn't think you'd push back," she said quietly. I nodded. "That's the problem." She left without another word. I locked the door and slid down against it, heart pounding. Not from guilt, from finality. The investigation moved faster after that. Marissa kept me updated with careful precision. "They're facing penalties," she said. "Back taxes, interest, possible fines." "What about the loan?" I asked. "That's being reviewed too," she said. "Using your financial documents without consent is serious." I exhaled slowly. "I never wanted this," I said. "I know," she replied. "But you didn't choose it. They did." A week later, another article appeared, this one less sympathetic. It mentioned discrepancies, unreported income, a family dispute that had uncovered deeper issues. Names still weren't printed, but everyone who mattered knew. My phone buzzed constantly that day. I didn't answer. That night I sat alone in my apartment, the city humming below. I thought about how easily love had turned into leverage in my family, how generosity had become expectation, how silence had been mistaken for consent. The hardest truth wasn't that they'd betrayed me. It was that they'd never seen me as separate from what I provided. I poured myself a glass of wine and stood by the window. Somewhere across town, my parents were facing consequences they'd never planned for. Claire was scrambling to protect her image, and I was finally still. Not numb, still. The last message of the night came from an unknown number. "Please, we need help!" I stared at it for a long time. Then I deleted it. Because some lessons don't stick unless you let people feel the full weight of what they built. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't cushioning the fall. The turning point didn't announce itself with drama. It arrived quietly, the way truth usually does, wrapped in paperwork and silence. I found out on a Wednesday morning when Marissa called earlier than usual. "They've listed their house," she said. I sat up in bed. "Which one?" "Their primary residence," she replied. "They're selling." For a moment I couldn't speak. That house wasn't just a place. It was my mother's proof of status. Her stage. The backdrop for every carefully curated family gathering, every photo meant to say, "Look how well we're doing." "They don't have a choice," Marissa continued. "Between the audit, the loan review, and the loss of rental income, they need liquidity." I swallowed. "So this is real." "It's very real," she said. When the call ended, I lay back against my pillows, staring at the ceiling. For years, I'd been the invisible reinforcement behind their comfort, the unseen beam holding everything up. Now that beam was gone, and the structure was collapsing exactly the way unsupported things do. Slowly, then all at once, that afternoon I ran into someone I hadn't expected. My mother's friend Linda cornered me outside a grocery store. She smiled too quickly, eyes flicking around as if checking who might be watching. "I hear things have been tense," she said. "That's one word for it," I replied. She leaned in conspiratorially. "Your mother is having such a hard time. People are worried." I met her gaze. "Worried about what?" "Well," she said delicately, "about how you've changed." There it was again. I smiled faintly. I stopped lying. She frowned, clearly unprepared for that answer. "I'm sure you have your reasons," she said. "But family is family." I nodded, "And consequences are consequences." She excused herself shortly after looking unsettled. That night my father called again. I let it ring twice before answering. "We're selling the house," he said without preamble. "I know," I replied. Silence. "You always know," he said quietly. Not accusing, just tired. "What do you want me to say?" I asked. "I don't know," he admitted. I thought if things got bad enough, you'd step in." I closed my eyes. "That's not a plan, that's an expectation." "We raised you to help family," he said. "You raised me to sacrifice," I replied. "There's a difference." His voice broke. "Your mother feels like she's lost everything." I took a slow breath. "She lost control. Not everything. She says you're punishing her." "I'm protecting myself," I said. Another pause. "We don't recognize you anymore," he said. I opened my eyes. I finally recognized myself. He didn't argue. When the call ended, I felt the familiar ache rise, but it didn't own me the way it used to. It passed through like weather instead of settling into bone. The next development came from Claire's side. Her business started unraveling. Not dramatically, not publicly at first, just cancellations. Clients who suddenly decided to go another direction. A project put on indefinite hold. A partnership that quietly dissolved. She called me after 10 one night, voice sharp and brittle. "You did this?" she said. I leaned against the counter listening. "I didn't cancel your clients." "You exposed us," she snapped. "People don't trust us anymore." "People don't trust lies," I replied. "You could fix this," she said again. "You always fix things." "I won't," I said. She went silent. "Do you even care what happens to us?" she asked. I considered the question. "I care," I said honestly. "I just won't destroy myself to save you." She laughed bitterly. "You're cold." "No," I said. "I'm done bleeding quietly." She hung up. The final confirmation came a week later. A formal notice arrived from the county. The audit had concluded. Penalties assessed. Back taxes owed. My parents were given a deadline. I stared at the letter for a long time. My name printed clearly at the top, as the rightful owner of the lake property. My financial records clean, documented, unimpeachable. For the first time, the power imbalance wasn't emotional. It was structural. They couldn't guilt their way out of this. They couldn't rewrite it. They couldn't cry loudly enough to make it disappear, and that terrified them. 2 days later, my grandmother called again. "They're coming apart," she said softly. "I know," I replied. "I don't blame you," she said. "I blame the years before this." I closed my eyes. I wish it didn't have to end like this. "It didn't end," she corrected gently. "It transformed." That word stayed with me. Transformation. Not revenge. Not destruction. Transformation. The truth was, I didn't feel victorious. I felt grounded. Like someone who'd finally put both feet on solid ground after years of standing on shifting sand. That night I stood on my balcony watching the city lights shimmer. Somewhere out there, my parents were packing boxes, sorting through a life they'd assumed would always be supported by someone else's sacrifice. Claire was scrambling to salvage her image, her business, her narrative. And I was breathing freely for the first time in years. The old instinct whispered that I should feel guilty. I didn't. I felt something better. Integrity. Because revenge isn't always loud. Sometimes it looks like stepping back and letting the truth do the damage it was always meant to do. And once that happens, there's no going back. Only forward. The first apology came too late to matter. It arrived in my inbox on a quiet Sunday morning, buried between newsletters and work reminders, as if it were just another obligation I could choose to ignore. Subject line, please read. It was from my mother. I stared at it for a long time before opening it. Not because I was afraid of what it would say, but because I already knew. I had lived this pattern my entire life. Crisis, fear, soft words, a reach for the old balance where I carried the weight and everyone else felt relieved. I opened it anyway. She wrote about being overwhelmed, about never meaning to hurt me, about how things had gotten out of hand. She wrote that families make mistakes, that she hoped I could find it in my heart to forgive her, that she missed me. She did not mention the wedding. She did not mention the loan. She did not mention lying. She did not mention trying to access my accounts. She did not say the word sorry once. I closed the email and leaned back in my chair. There it was, the final proof. This wasn't remorse, it was panic dressed as affection. An hour later, my father followed with a shorter message, more direct, less emotional. We're under a lot of pressure. We never thought things would go this far. We just want our family back. I read that line twice. Our family. Not me, not my trust, not my dignity. The structure, the convenience, the version of family that functioned because I absorbed the cost. I didn't respond to either email. Instead, I went for a walk. The city was quiet that morning, the kind of stillness that only comes after weeks of emotional noise. I walked without headphones, letting my thoughts move at their own pace. I thought about the first time I'd felt responsible for my parents' stability. I couldn't have been older than 12, my mother crying at the kitchen table, my father pacing. Bills spread out like accusations. I remembered stepping forward without being asked, offering to skip something to help somehow to make it better. They'd smiled then, called me mature, strong. That was the moment the role began. By the time I reached the river, my chest felt lighter. I realized something important. They didn't miss me. They missed what I did for them. That afternoon, Marissa called. They're asking for mediation, she said. Informal. No lawyers present. I laughed softly. Of course they are. Do you want to? She asked. I considered it. 6 months ago, I would have said yes immediately. I would have believed conversation could fix what boundaries were finally correcting. Now? No, I said. They don't want resolution. They want relief. Marissa was quiet for a moment. I agree. The next escalation came from Claire. She didn't call this time. She sent a message. I know I hurt you, but Mom and Dad are really struggling. If you help now, things could go back to normal. Normal. The word felt foreign. I typed my response slowly. Normal for you meant I paid and stayed quiet. That version of me doesn't exist anymore. She replied almost instantly. So you're just done with us. I stared at the screen, then answered honestly. I'm done being used. That's not the same thing. No reply came after that. The final shoe dropped a week later. The sale of my parents' house became official. I found out through public records first, then through a call from my grandmother. They moved into a smaller place, she said, temporary. I pictured my mother in unfamiliar rooms, stripped of the stage she'd curated for years. I felt a flicker of sadness, but it didn't consume me. Loss didn't always mean injustice. Sometimes it meant correction. That night my father called one last time. His voice was tired, older than I remembered. We didn't plan for this, he said. I know, I replied. We thought you'd always be there, he admitted. I closed my eyes. That's the problem. A long silence followed. I hope you're happy, he said finally. I considered the word. Happy isn't the right one, I said, but I'm at peace. He didn't argue. When the call ended, I didn't cry. I felt something settle instead. Closure. Not the kind that comes with apologies or reconciliation. The kind that comes when you stop waiting for people to become who they never were. The last message arrived days later, from Claire. 3 words. I'm losing everything. I stared at them, my heart steady. Then I typed back, I lost myself once. I'm not doing that again. I set my phone down and turned off the light. Outside, the city hummed softly, indifferent to family drama and personal reckonings. And for the first time, that indifference felt like freedom. Because I wasn't invisible anymore. I had simply stepped out of a story that required my erasure to function, and that story without me was finally collapsing under its own weight. 6 months later, the lake was still. Not the dramatic kind of stillness that comes before a storm, but the honest kind, the kind that doesn't ask anything of you. I sat on the back deck of the Lake Briarwood house with a mug of coffee warming my hands, watching sunlight ripple across the water. The house felt different now, lighter. Not because it was empty, but because it was finally quiet in the right way. Mine. The past half year had been strangely uneventful, and that I learned was the point. No late-night calls, no emergencies disguised as family obligation, no sudden crises that required my bank account and my silence. The constant tension I'd lived with for so long had drained away slowly like pressure released from a valve I didn't know existed. Peace didn't arrive all at once, it crept in. I changed jobs, nothing dramatic, just a move to a smaller firm where I wasn't praised for burning myself out, where success wasn't measured by how much I could carry for other people. I redecorated the house, took down the heavy furniture my parents had chosen, let light in, planted herbs by the kitchen window. I learned what it felt like to make decisions without checking how they might affect someone else's comfort first. Some nights the guilt still tried to visit. It knocked softly, familiar, persistent. I learned not to open the door. I heard about my family through fragments, never directly. My parents were still in the smaller place. Temporary had become indefinite. My father's voice had lost its authority in the stories people told. My mother's had lost its audience. Claire's business never recovered fully. She took contract work, quiet work, no posts, no declarations, just survival. Once my grandmother sent me a letter, her handwriting shaky but deliberate. "You did what no one else could. You stopped the cycle." I folded it carefully and placed it in a drawer. Forgiveness came later than I expected. Not forgiveness for them, for myself. I forgave the version of me who thought love had to hurt to be real, who believed being indispensable was the same as being valued, who learned too young that peace meant silence. One evening, as the sun set low over the lake, my phone buzzed. An unknown number. I stared at it for a long moment before answering. "Evelyn," my mother said. Her voice sounded different, smaller, stripped of its certainty. "I won't stay long," she said quickly. I wanted to say something." I waited. "I didn't understand what I was doing," she said. "I thought keeping control meant keeping the family together." I closed my eyes. "And I know saying that doesn't fix anything," she continued. "But I needed you to know I see it now." There was a pause. "I'm sorry," she said. The word landed softly. Too late to change the past. Too late to reopen the door she'd closed so many times herself. But real. "I hope you're well," she added. "I am," I said. And I meant it. We hung up without promises, without plans, without the old pull. That was the difference. Afterward, I didn't feel relief or triumph. I felt complete. That night, I sat alone by the window, the house glowing behind me, the lake reflecting the moon. I thought about how long I'd waited for permission to live my own life. It never came, so I took it. Revenge hadn't looked the way I'd imagined when this began. There were no speeches, no public humiliations, no dramatic declarations. The real revenge was quieter. I stopped explaining. I stopped paying. I stopped shrinking. And in doing so, I reclaimed something far more valuable than money or property. Myself. If you're listening to this story and it feels uncomfortably familiar, let me tell you something I wish someone had told me sooner. You are not selfish for choosing yourself. You are not cruel for setting boundaries. And you are not wrong for walking away from people who only love you when you are useful. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is refuse to play the role that keeps everyone else comfortable at your expense. If this story resonated with you, share your thoughts, leave a comment, tell your story. Someone out there needs to hear it. And if you want more stories about truth boundaries and the quiet kind of justice that actually lasts, stay with me. Because sometimes the bravest ending isn't revenge, it's freedom.